welcome to the 4th Annual Guild of Music Supervisors Conference.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're here to ask the age-old question, why hire a music supervisor? We have some very talented people on the panel who will explain why hire a music supervisor from their perspective. They're going to introduce themselves in just a moment. Just to let you know, I'm a music supervisor. I'm working on a couple of shows right now for Amazon, or Amazon, as the British say, and Man in the High Castle, and Good Girls Revolt. Worked on a show, Wayward Pines. I have a movie in Toronto right now called Carrie Pilby. So, you know, why hire a music supervisor? We're going to tell you. But why don't we start with Jeff to introduce yourself and let him know what you're up to?
All right. I'm Jeff Cardoni. I'm a composer. I am working on, I'll say the supervisor too. I do Silicon Valley on HBO with Rudy Chung and Jason Alexander. I just did a movie called Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates for Fox. John Houlihan was a supervisor. I got a new show for ABC called Speechless with Manish Ravel as the supervisor. A show called Training Day for CBS. It's coming out mid-season. John Houlihan supervisor. And a movie called Middle School, Worst Years of My Life, comes out October 6th. And that was JoJo and Dave Jordan, our music supervisors.
That's a big list for one composer, but great stuff. Ben?
Yeah, my name is Ben Baumgartner. I'm a picture editor. I just got done working on a show with Gary, Good Girls Revolt for Amazon. Currently, I'm on a show for ABC called Imaginary Mary, which is a new pilot that's going to air. And then before that, I had worked on, Heart of Dixie for the CW and various other shows and pilots.
Well, very nice. I'm Trisha Holloway, and I oversee music at Freeform. And I hire music supervisors a lot. I come from being a music supervisor. I was an independent music supervisor for numerous years, and worked at a studio before that. And so now I see a lot of my students from my class, actually, from UCLA. There's a music supervision class there. Hello to you. Yeah, that's it. And I just got out of the shower, so that's why I'm not sweating this profusely. Shower.
And I'm Angie Rubin, music editor, and I'm working on 50 Shades of Grey 2, because only one 50 Shades of Grey wasn't enough. And before that, I worked on Almost Christmas. 50 Shades of Grey's music supervisor is Dana Sano. Love working with her. Almost Christmas is coming out shortly. Music supervisor on that was Julia Michaels. And right before that, I worked with Sacha Baron Cohen on The Brothers Grimsby, and we had no music supervisor, and that was awful. So I'm very proud to be here today. There you go.
What was awful?
To not have a music supervisor.
Oh, there you go, right there.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we start with you, Angie? I know as a music supervisor, the music editor is my closest ally, my best friend, makes our choices sound great. Can you explain your relationship with a music supervisor? You said it was horrible not to have one. How do you work with a music supervisor?
Honestly, I really can't imagine not having one. I can talk about what I'm doing right now, which is, we were chatting about it earlier. I have the perfect team. I'm the music editor. Dana Sano is the music supervisor of 50 Shades of Grey 2. We both did the first 50 Shades together. And Danny Elfman is the composer. Richard Francis Bruce is the picture editor. And we're just a really tight team. I mean, we work together all day, every day. Everything we do, we talk about with each other, and I can't imagine not having that.
And would you say how is your time divided between your work with your composer and your music supervisor?
On a film like this, actually, Danny is going to have his own music editor because it's just going to get so busy. So basically, Dana and I hang out in the cutting room, I mean, literally all day, every day. And we listen to songs and we try songs, and she'll say, oh, why not this for this scene? And I'll say, oh, well, what if, maybe let's try that. And it's just a complete collaboration. And then we'll go grab the picture editor and we'll say, oh, come in and listen to this. And then, you know, he'll say, well, why don't you give that to me and let me work with that a little bit? What if I open this shot up a little more? It's just such a team. And I can't imagine not having that. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yes, very cool. Trisha, you came up as a music supervisor initially, and now you're kind of a studio exec overseeing music supervisors. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us, you know, when you decide to bring a supervisor in, or when you do it yourself, or when a show may not be appropriate for a music supervisor?
Well, I think I should set it up a little bit. Can you guys hear me?
I can't really hear you, but...
Anyway, can you hear me now?
Verizon.
Yeah, exactly. So I've worked being an independent music supervisor for film and TV. I've done, you know, a little bit of like ads and trailers and things like that. But I used to work at Lionsgate doing television and film music supervision. But we're independent. Then transitioned into being mostly film only. Then we're independent and sort of was doing anything that you can. And then for a little while I was moving around as a creative executive at different television studios and landed at ABC Family, which has now transitioned and become rebranded into Freeform. So it's really different depending on whether we're talking about television, whether we're talking about an independent film or a studio film, because when you get brought on is very different. For television, when there's experienced showrunners involved, often they already have a person. So everything they do, once they've established a relationship with someone they trust, and I think that happens a lot with music supervisors, once someone's like clicks and like, yep, I can trust them, I can trust their creative choices, I know that I won't get left in a situation, they tend to go back to those music supervisors all the time and very loyal teams. So oftentimes on the television side of things, the showrunners will come already with the music supervisor in mind. So unless there's a problem, it's kind of like, yep, they're good to go. Other times, if it's newer production, and I'm in this situation quite a lot, because with Freeform, we're going from where it was with ABC Family, which was 20% original content and 80% licensed. We're flipping that as Freeform into 80% original and 20% licensed. So we're doing so many new shows, so many pilots, and so there's a lot. And because we want cool and edgy and interesting stuff, there's a lot of new teams. They don't have their music supervisors. So sometimes I'm fulfilling that role, but other times I'm looking for music supervisors to help out and jump in those cases. And that's where as soon as the show is sort of a series or the pilot is about to, once their scripts start coming in and they have an idea of how much the show might need musically, the way that it's set up, whether it's a drama or whether it's a comedy, then that's when we start talking about music supervisors. Then just we might sort of bring it up, hey, check in, do you need somebody? And they're like, actually, we're not going to need someone to a post. But if it's a script that has a lot of on-camera music performances, maybe they're in the car a lot and they're singing along to the music, they're going to need to make sure that they have the songs chosen in advance of shooting. So it just depends on the script, really, and what that requires. If we need music to be cleared and done in advance, or whether it's something to be handled during post. Yeah. But as an independent music supervisor on independent films or even TV shows that get packaged and then distributed, it's usually determined by the script again. Like sometimes it can just be even like 6 weeks into post. They'll be like, oh, we need someone actually who can give us songs that, you know, and not just an editor sort of pulling from his personal knowledge or her personal knowledge or their taste. We might need someone who can be like, what is something I can be strategic with, something that's going to be coming out when the film's coming out. We have a really limited budget. These songs are amazing, but we know we can't afford them. So a music supervisor will bring that creative and business side to the choices and the options that are presented to the director or showrunner or whoever. And that's a big plus, and the biggest part of it is knowing, kind of like buying a car and lifting up the hood and seeing what's happening with the motor. The music supervisor can lift it up, see what the business is, who are the people involved on the business side of it, and how likely is it that it will clear and be affordable, etc.
Thank you. Ben is a picture editor, as he said. How do you approach the music? I don't know. I'm imagining sometimes you are starting on a project before a music supervisor is on. So you're kind of on your own to sort of start the temping process. Can you tell us how that process goes for you?
Yeah, a lot of the shows I've worked on, there's, usually, a music supervisor has already been hired. But I still kind of, on other projects, when I've approached music, it's usually, I look at it kind of, what the script is, what the world is, what, time period. And then I start kind of forming ideas based on that. And just kind of like start listening to, what I have available to kind of get an idea of what music's going to work, well for the show, well for certain scenes, certain characters, and a lot of times, I'll look at a script and I'll see, okay, this has a bar, so I'm going to need something in here. I'm going to need some kind of a source music. If I'm dealing with like the ending of a show, I'll look for something that may be appropriate to that. And sometimes even though if there is a music supervisor on board already, like I'll kind of still form my own ideas of what I think I may want. Then that way I can even go to them and pitch them kind of an idea of what maybe I have for a certain scene or a type or genre of a music that would maybe work. And then they can pitch me back something that they've had in mind for that same, because even, I may be doing breakdowns on my end. A lot of times the music supervisor's done their kind of breakdowns of what they think would work in certain scenarios and stuff like that. So that's what I do a lot of times is I'll kind of, once I get the first script, I'll kind of just read it down and kind of just start thinking about what emotionally may be nice to have for certain moments or certain beats and scenes and things like that, and kind of, start thinking about that. And like a lot of times I'll use, a streaming service to kind of just start listening to things that may be appropriate. But, on that account too, what I have access to is very limited. So that's where the music supervisor is very vital in that process, is they can, bring things to the table that, no one's ever heard before, like emerging artists and things like that. So that's just a little bit of like, my process when coming onto a new show and kind of starting to think about what would be appropriate to kind of have, as far as music goes.
And of course, you're working at that point mostly creatively. I mean, you might put something in that may not be clearable or may not work in the budget or things like that, which I imagine is where your music supervisor would kind of take over.
Yeah, and that's what's always like, I've enjoyed being on shows where there is like kind of an initial music meeting with the composers, the supervisor, the music editor, and everybody kind of comes in there, because then you kind of get an idea of, what the show is going to kind of be about, what the music is going to be like. And just also I think the budget's really important, because, there's no use listening to Coldplay and the Stones and bands like that if you have a very limited music budget, because it's never going to happen. You're not going to get that kind of music. So like, having those initial meetings and knowing that information, I think is important and helpful to picture editors, just because it's, if they're kind of being proactive, and some editors are more so with music and some are less, depending on their backgrounds and what they enjoy, then they kind of aren't spinning their wheels or trying to even influence the EPs, like cutting it. And that's the thing, is you can kind of get in trouble with this kind of temp love, where you're cutting in a Coldplay song that you have no budget to use and everybody's kind of falling in love with it. And then you can get them to, where, now the music supervisor has to deal with finding something that's as good with a very small budget, which is extremely difficult.
Yeah. Jeff, the composer, at what point how do you communicate with music supervisors? You find your paths cross often?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't think of one time where the supervisor... I can't think of one time when the supervisor wasn't hired before me. They seem to be brought on earlier and very influential in getting hired. Supervisors are they're part of the team. Like you got in a film, you got the director, you got the producers, but the supervisors are as trusted from day one a lot of times. And they're part of that team. So as a composer, they're very important in getting on your side and getting their trust because it's a big difference.
Yeah.
It's very helpful. But they've always been hired before a composer in the world I live in.
Yeah. Ben, so have you worked on many shows where there has been no supervisor and you had to kind of take care of that aspect?
No, every scripted show that I've worked on has always had a music supervisor that came in either around the time or a lot earlier. I think they either probably were somebody that the EPs had worked with before or the APs had a relationship with. I worked in some reality where we didn't have a music supervisor, but we weren't using licensed music. We were basically using a lot of score from the composer and what I kind of call like buyout or royalty free, which is just like the killer tracks and like Black Toast and like those library type music. So that's what more I've experienced. And like I was saying earlier, if I am on a project, whether it be like an independent film or something like that, and I've not had a music supervisor, I'm very limited on what I can kind of bring to the table as far as musically, because it's just either stuff that I've listened to or just that's out there already in the world. So, depending if it's a modern day piece or period piece, when it's something that's set in the period, all that's kind of already been explored. Though I've worked on shows that have been set like in the 60s, and one thing that the music supervisor did that I thought brought a lot to the project is they started pitching, like we started with stuff that was strictly period, and then I don't know if it was just based on seeing it in the cut, and that really changes everything. That's one thing as a picture editor that you may have a song that someone think works well and you think works well, and then you lay it to picture and it doesn't work. And I worked on a show that was set in the 60s, and we started with just strictly period music, and then certain people felt like it wasn't working, so the music supervisor started bringing modern day music that had a period feel to it, or were covers of songs from that period that really brought a lot to the project and just gave it kind of new life, gave it a new edge. And that I was very appreciative of having a music supervisor, because that's something that if I was on myself trying to do that would be extremely difficult, just because of my limited knowledge. I could only bring stuff that was maybe from that period that I was familiar with.
What was that project you're talking about?
That was Astronaut Wives Club.
Yeah, Astronaut Wives.
Yeah.
And some shows, like our show, Good Girls Revolt, we wanted to have authentic music from that period. Covers would not cut it. So that just depends on the producer's choice.
It's also I think it's whatever the EP and showrunner's kind of vision of that show and that kind of period, and like what they want the audience to kind of experience. If it's more visceral and feels like authentic to someone who was there living it, and I think that's one thing with Good Girls, the way they kind of decided to stay with that just strictly period was, I think, because of that, and also being maybe being a real life scenario and based on a book as well.
Right. So. Angie, can you tell us what I know you have a happy family over there on your shows, but how do you work specifically with the music supervisor? As far as when we're still in the sort of pitching music stage, pitching to the producers to see what's going to work.
Well, and I was listening and thinking about that as you guys were talking, and one of the things that I feel a music supervisor brings is a whole different skill set than what I have. I mean, I'm not good with keeping up on current music. I mean, there's no time. I'm not good at all with politics and navigating the waters of, dealing with record companies and artists and studio executives, and so to me, I really look up to music supervisors a lot because they have a very, very specific skill set that is so fantastic and so compatible and collaborative. So, for example, on just because I'm currently working on 50 Shades of Grey, I mean, there's so much more than just finding a great song. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
10% of the job.
It really is. I mean, then you got to find out the whole history of that song and who what artist you want, and is that artist gonna give you the song exclusively, and is that artist gonna be on tour, and is the artist international because 50 Shades of Grey is I mean, there's so much involved, and my job is just to kind of cut it exquisitely and present it, and be as honest as I can. I mean, I think that's one thing that I would like to say, my reputation, I mean, I'm really honest. It's all over my face. Mike Knobloch or the director or whatever, they'll know right away. Like if I like something or if I don't, they don't even have to ask me. So yeah, finding a good song is just the beginning. So for me, music supervisors are heroes to me because they know the whole history and future of what a song needs to be, and I don't have that skill set.
Well, you are our heroine as well, as well as being your hero.
Well,
I
mean,
do you
it's so
find that
fun.
it's
fun to cut. It's really fun to. I mean, I say, look at Ben, and like the scene's well edited, and you have a great song. I mean, there's just nothing more fun. We're dealing with it right now. Although I signed an NDA, so I'm probably not supposed to say it. But it's awesome. Whether a scene and a song, and it just works, and like there's nothing kind of more exciting, when that all comes together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point to even bring up that, like, sometimes I feel like a music supervisor can protect you, at least a picture editor, because you can put something together and you put a song in, and then like all the EPs and producers love this scene with this song, and sometimes you can't get that song. And one thing that's, I think, invaluable that a music supervisor brings to the table is they can protect you and be like, don't use that song because we can't clear it, So that's one thing that I really like, having a music supervisor that will let me know. That way, you're not presenting something that you have to then take away. It's like, here's this great cake for everybody to eat. No, never mind. Like, we can't use that. And then you have to present something that's not maybe as strong. So I feel like that's something that's invaluable that a music supervisor can do, is just kind of protect the process in that sense, where you're not presenting things to, studios or networks that you can't deliver.
Although sometimes a supervisor doesn't know. I mean, you think something's going to clear, you hope something's going to clear. There's no red flags of why something won't clear.
Right.
And then it doesn't clear. We had a situation like that on a Nico Jackson Brown song on Good Girls Revolt. Everybody loved it. And for some reason, Jackson Brown's people didn't want us to have it. So as a music supervisor, I had to come in and better that song with something else, with a Donovan
And
song.
that always happens too, when I feel like that always happens where you're like, there's no song that could beat this.
Well,
and then you end up beating it, and it's like, oh my God, I'm so glad that didn't work out, because this is the best song that could ever possibly work.
That is always my first inclination. Is like, well, nothing's going to be better than this.
Right.
And then, you just put one foot in front of the other, and there's not only one great song for one great scene.
I was going to say that I think back to what you were talking about is, for me, like working in the television network, is music supervisors come in and set up and organize the show, both financially, creatively, business side, and back to your thing with the politics. Like, there is so many things that are working against you, which is like the EP's daughter who's 9 and thinks she knows all the cool stuff. Well, I don't know. My daughter doesn't think it's that cool. Like, your daughter going to nightclubs and dancing, till 5 a.m. and taking a bunch of things. So it's like, it's a big difference. You know what I mean? Like, is knowing who your audience is and who you have to who have to get this by. Like at the end of the day, who's making the decisions, and are you going to fight for it and sort of say, hey, respectfully, I think this might be a little close to you. You're making a personal decision on this because you're attached to a song that, that it means something to you. And that can be really tricky. When somebody got engaged to a song, got like married to a song, whatever, and then there's a wedding scene, there's going to be no other song that's going to work in this wedding dance. Like there's plenty of songs that can work there. Or maybe when it's like the first time they connected or hooked up with like their love, and then they put that song in a scene, and then it's like, no, it can't be there. Her skirt's too short. She's too slutty. It was really nice. It's like all of these emotions and personal things. Like music is very personal. People are very attached to things. So it gets really, really tricky. And a music supervisor is really the diplomat in the situation. The yes and, like, could this work? Like, yes, and how about this one over here? And yes, and how about that one over there? So your music supervisor at the end of the day also, I think, is a big, big thing that people don't think about. Like, oh, we don't really want to pay the extra money for a music supervisor. That music supervisor will save you the amount of money that you paid for them, which we all know it's not,
Times 100.
Yes. A music supervisor will save you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. I feel like across the board, depending what your budget is. If your budget's $20,000, they'll end up saving you a whole lot more to make sure that it covered their fee and whatever it is that you had for the budget. If your budget's $200,000, the same thing. You can never put an amount of money on the music supervisor because they'll save you, because it comes down to relationships, right? So the same person can put in the same quote request for the same scene and the same song. Everything could be the same about it. And for one person, it might be, $20,000, and for somebody else, it's going to be $10,000.
I wondered about that.
It happens all the time, and it really
Wow.
comes down to, because the music supervisor sets it. It's not like, I'm friends with you, so I'm going to give you a better deal. It's not that. A good music supervisor will be able to tell them why they want their music in this project. You know what I mean? So you set it up. So you don't just be like, well, we have this scene, we want that song, how much is it going to be? Like, that's the most basic of the process. And to be honest with you, that's the stuff that's on the quote request that goes to the clearance person at the publisher or the label, right? But if you're being a proactive music supervisor, you're trying to do strategic marketing tie-ins. You're trying to be thoughtful. You're trying to, you have to work out, like, who wants who more? Do we want the song in the show, and the show needs a song more than the label or the publisher needs a song placement, or third-party pitching person? So all those things come into it. It's like, you know what, we've had this one artist, we haven't got anything for them lately. Can you just try and find a spot for them somewhere? Yeah, of course. And it's like, we found a spot. Oh, we've got a great song. It's so much cheaper than it would normally have been. It's like 2 songs side by side, same level of indie, like indie rock artist, same kind of followers, whatever. For some reason, this one hasn't been getting any syncs, and the person who's working at the label is getting a lot of heat. All of a sudden, yeah, you want to use that for this, you want to use it for this. Okay, so we all, it's like having relationships, knowing where, like, songs don't stay, they're not a static feed, they're up and down, depending on what's going on. Oh, we have a single coming out, we really want to get a lot of publicity for it. So like the fees kind of reduced on the way up for it coming out. And then afterwards, single's out, it's doing well. They don't really need our help that much anymore to get awareness for that artist or the band. So the fees go up. So it's kind of like, you need the music supervisors to be talking to your publishers, to the labels, the third-party pitching people, sometimes management if it's an indie person, and knowing where it is on the trajectory, going up, coming down, all of those kind of things. If they're setting up a tour, and those good things back to things. So it just depends. Like, sometimes the projects don't, the marketing side of things doesn't matter. It's like, we just want any music that will work, that's great, that's affordable, and we don't know when we're going to release this. It could be end of year, it could be next summer, so just don't make it too cool right now in this moment, so that by the time it comes out, it's dated. So we need all that sort of
Very cool. Thank you.
things to keep in mind.
Yes, definitely. Time is flying by. We're going to try and take some questions. We're kind of running into our lunch period here. We can take questions on all aspects for any of our esteemed guests.
Hi, guys. Thanks very much for your time. My question is for, I suppose, Tricia and Gary, perhaps. How often, if at all, do you find yourself advocating for composers or influencing the producers and the hiring of composers on a project?
Very often.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, I'll come in after a composer, so that won't be appropriate. But the last several shows I've worked on, I have pitched the composers who have ended up getting hired. And at that point, we're very involved. And, the showrunners, the producers, they don't have time to really go through all the reels that we receive. And I would say we're extremely involved in that process most of the time.
I mean, I would say every time. I mean, I know any project, an agent will pitch reels to the music supervisor, like almost 9 times out of 10. So they're like gatekeepers for sure. Absolutely.
And again, it's also relationships. If a showrunner has worked with a particular composer in the past, they have a good relationship. They think their sound would work. So that's also a part
That
of it.
happens a lot of the time in television. And with films, I think people are a lot more open. So we end up back to the composer agents pitching us and stuff like that. But that happens regardless of whether we have any influence or not. But as a studio executive, it's more like, do they have someone on board? And then can I say, this guy sounds great, but have you thought about, just so you're aware, that there are other composers that are doing stuff that you've been talking about that maybe the composer that you've been working with all this time doesn't necessarily have the skill set. So I always try and present composers as options, and always, like, as soon as we know about it, I'll proactively, start thinking about who might be right for it, and then reach out to the agents, have them send me reels, go through the reels, and pitch them. There's a lot of times there's music supervisors where your role is simply to oversee the songs, clear them, and all that sort of stuff. But that happens a lot. But I think it just depends on the skill set of the supervisor. Some supervisors are not that into the score side of things, So you always hire the music supervisor that's right for that. So is this a score music supervisor, someone who's like, knows about composers, knows about score, knows about setting up the scenes, score-wise. So I think that also comes down to the choice of music supervisor. Are they super into this? Can they collaborate? Can they help maybe bring the songs to become part of the score, sort of like depending on what the project needs are. But yeah, all the time.
Next question.
This is probably for Gary and Tricia, but feel free if you've got anything on it. I just want to know if there's any examples of how the expectation for a supervisor's responsibility varies on certain instances. For example, is the supervisor going to be doing the paperwork for all the contracts versus in-house legal or marketing, working with the marketing team on, putting together a campaign based on the music inside the film?
I'll jump on that real quick in terms of television, because I know we're running out of time. For TV, the music supervisors that we hire on our shows are responsible for doing the music clearances and also do the confirmation letters. And then it's handed off to the MLE or the music clearance person. They're responsible also for any of the other paperwork that might be necessary for like on-camera performances or vocals on theme songs. They'll usually coordinate with someone like me. So a lot of the studio or music executive, depending on whether it's a film or TV. But yeah, definitely the clearance. I mean, almost always the clearance, the initial clearance, but doesn't have to be. But the truth is, as a music supervisor, I prefer to do my own clearance. I think most supervisors do, because you can ensure that what you've talked about with the label or the publisher or whoever is involved that's what ends up on the paperwork. Because a lot of times, when it's detached and there's somebody else handling it, it's like you talk with them, they pitched it to you, they said it's going to clear for $3,000, and all of a sudden it comes back through the music clearance and it's like $7,500. Like, what's going on? You have to call over there, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of different people involved. So it's not always necessary. Sometimes in a rare situation, the in-house clearance people will do it, but it's not always ideal, I would say.
I agree with that. Next.
Thank you for being here. Just wondering what happens when you spend a lot of money on a song and then it doesn't get used? Like, where does that money go? Is it,
Doesn't happen. You do it. You don't clear the song.
the song gets cut. The song like gets cut out of the film or something.
Oh yeah, you don't pay for it before.
I know it seems like an obvious
I
question,
don't want
but
to bring that story up.
because if you
I
buy
would
it
just
for
say
a
that you
couple
end up,
years-
what you do is like there might be 7 different songs that have been cut into one spot to see which is the best version of it. You might go out for clearance on 2 because you have a feeling that the best one might not clear. So on that, so you're not paying for the songs, you're getting quotes on how much it's going to be, and then you don't pay for it until you know it's absolutely in there and it's mixed in. And so
It's an obvious question. Yeah, I guess I
That's
just
okay.
wondered that after, but so you don't get paid till after. It's definitely in.
Yeah, so what happens is once you go to the mix, you can, like the final, you've whatever's happening, the print master's in there, you've mixed it, it's printed, it's done, it's locked, everything's changed, nothing's changing. So then from there, the music editor will confirm what the length of the use is. And then from there, you go back to people, you confirm the use, they quoted on it, you confirm, yes, we're using it. It's actually going to be 27 seconds because you might have cleared it for up to 30 seconds. It's 27 seconds long. And then, so you do the license request. And so the process can be a little bit longer afterwards. Sometimes it can be up to 60, 90 days afterwards, depending on how quick, if there's a pre-negotiated license language. So it really varies. It could be if it's totally indie and you don't have your own licensing forms, the music supervisor or the producer or whoever it might be giving the music license to the licensor. So, and they're just like, yep, and it can be done in 10 days. So it just depends on the particular project.
You don't
Another
pay
question?
if you don't use it.
Yeah, you don't pay if you don't use it though.
What's that?
You don't pay if you don't use it.
No.
Although you can pay in pain. Like that you really wanted the other one. That's all. Cheers.
Have we got another question out there? No more questions? Oh, this young man. This man. Stand up, please.
Regarding hiring composers, have you ever hired a composer or went to bat for a composer who you didn't know and had only submitted a reel that you don't have a prior relationship with?
Well, I mean, many times I don't have relationships with the composers because there's just too many people to know. You know what I mean? Like there's way too many composers. But if something's really amazing, like somebody turned in something really amazing, be like, wow, this guy's really interesting. You go in and dig and see like what's their experience. Do they know how to do this? Can we give them a shot? Is this a show that's going to have the flexibility of working with somebody who might not have the experience to make sure that they turn around everything in time? Do they have the team in place? Sounds like in that situation might be independent composer. But then for me, I would try them out on theme songs. I would try them out on music that's for like our promos and trailers that's shorter and see how they do with the deadlines and that sort of stuff there. But on independent films, yes, absolutely. I've done that a million times.
Time for one more question from you. Stand up, please.
Hello. I know that you all have a slightly different role than that of a music supervisor, but do you ever find yourself having any time to listen to songs from independent singer-songwriters or just discovering new music that may be up and coming?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
Do you
sorry,
wanna-
I didn't quite hear that.
To reiterate, it's like, do you have time to listen to independent, up-and-coming singer-songwriters? And the answer is yes. The thing is, how do we find them? So a lot of times there's third-party pitching companies that might sort of act as a resource for us for up-and-coming singer-songwriters. It's really when we have a lot to listen to from all of the indie publishers and all of the major publishers, and same thing on the label side, and third-party pitching companies who might represent a plethora of indie people or indie artists that might just have a couple of songs that are amazing, but not enough to always be in touch with us directly. that's usually how we find them. There's a lot of third-party pitching companies, and I see a bunch of representatives here today. So you should be looking for them. Like, hey, I've got indie music. I'd like it to be shared with supervisors. I don't know how it necessarily works, but I do want somebody who understands the process, the business about it, and creatively is interested in my music and will vouch for me. Pitch it out. That's sort of the best way, because it can be really difficult for us to one-on-one. If this was a room full of indie songwriters and stuff, it can be very difficult for us to have the time to listen to everything. So it's really nice to have an aggregator, but I always am open to stuff whenever I can. It just depends on your time. I think it gets quite limited. Listening time, it's just tricky, but I think it's important, and everyone's open to it, and some people find music all different kinds of ways. But I would say yes, absolutely, and try and get someone on your side to help.
And it's good, instead of just pitching, which is obviously a big part of it, but if you have other things going, if you're playing around town, you've gotten some good reviews, if we hear about your name in a few different places, that's always, a good thing. I think that's going to do it. Trisha, anything else to add? Just kidding. Thank you so much for coming.